two things that I do in a standard week: watch and talk Formula One and study aviation at university. And wouldn't it be great if two of those things could overlap? And in 1979 they did. One of the biggest sporting icons of Formula One was Niki Lauda, the three-time world champion from Austria, who even had a Hollywood movie made about him. During and after his Formula One career, he actually created a national charter airline, LaudaAIR, and this is the story of the three-time world champion's venture from motorsport into aviation. One of the greatest guys I could talk about doing the two of those things. I absolutely love motorsport and aviation. He became not just a Formula One icon, but a businessman and an entrepreneur, and a business that is still running today. This is the story of Niki Lauda's venture into aviation and one of the most successful companies from a Formula One driver. And this is the history and the story of LaudaAir. Now first, let's just start off with Niki Lauda. He was a three-time Formula One world champion from Austria. He won the world championship in 1975 and 77 with Scuderia Ferrari. And then he took a break and then came back to Formula One with McLaren and won the world championship in 1984, beating Alain Prost, the French driver, by half a point in that season. He was a great driver. He was determined. There was even a Hollywood movie made about him called Rush, where Daniel Brühl, a German Hollywood actor, played him in a very, very accurate movie, and of course one of the best Formula One movies to date. In that final scene with James Hunt and Niki Lauda, James is of course flying off with his many friends and people who like his money and success. Well, Niki Lauda is walking around a Learjet 75 evaluating it, and he has a very good talk with James Hunt, who of course is a Hollywood actor played by Australian Chris Hemsworth in this scene. He talks about air law and how much he loves aviation and how James Hunt should actually join him in this passion. It's fun to do. You follow the rules, and of course aviation is very fun to do. Of course he is taking that Learjet for a flight. This actually happened in real life, and this was at New York's JFK Airport. He had a talk with James Hunt as he was about to take that Learjet 75 and do his commercial pilot's license. And in 1978, when he was still in Formula One, he did this during the Formula One season of 1978. An absolutely incredible story. Now, flying is done by many people around the world. It doesn't have to be their first and primary thing to do. There's a lot of sportsmen who do that. Niki Lauda, though, got his PPL and CPL, his commercial pilot's license. And in 1978, still competing in Formula One, he still had dreams to fly in aviation, either as a businessman or just commercially or as just for fun. He had a Learjet 75, which he would take out most of the time. And of course, an active holder of his CPL, he had to keep up his hours in this way. Niki Lauda's father and grandfather back in Austria were both businessmen in the world of banking and finance, and even though he was disowned by his family as they did not believe he could go down the motorsport industry, he still wanted to be a businessman and entrepreneur back in Austria. This is what led him down the line to think of a business where he could actually take his love of aviation into that sector, and thus he became an aviation businessman, creating LaudaAir. Now, this was the first adventure that he had actually thought of. He loved aviation and he wanted to take it into the real world. And in April of 1979, LaudaAir was created as a charter between Austria and Germany. He would take his Learjet 75 with a few Boeing and Fokker aircraft, and yes, I did say Fokker YouTube, and he would take charter flights between Austria and Germany, of course, a single domestic flight around Central Europe, with the aim, of course, of making a longer charter company in the future. The first plane that was actually taken on board for its first charter flight to Frankfurt Airport, which was his first LaudaAir flight in late 1979, was the BAC 111 Series 500, which was rented from British Airways in association with TACOM, which was a Brazilian aviation company that Niki Lauda partnered with in 1979 to, of course, fund and aid in the growth of LaudaAir. At the turn of 1980, the short-haul flight from Vienna to Munich, Frankfurt, Berlin in Germany, of course, just over the border, were introduced. Salzburg was used for a charter flight in December for the skiing, and of course they did Alpine flights, and Alpine, not Renault flights, to France, Switzerland and Italy. They even made long-haul flights from Vienna to Sydney via Bangkok in Thailand, and flights via Kuala Lumpur and Bali, and daily flights to Dubai, Cuba. And in 2000, Air Lauda became a subsidiary with Austrian Airlines, doing long-haul and short-haul flights and getting on the world maps, doing flights to the USA, Australia, Japan, and basically every corner of the world. In the early 2000s, LaudaAir was one of the biggest airlines coming out of Austria, and alongside Austrian Airlines, it was a second choice for Austrian and German flyers in Central Europe on long-haul flights all around the world. Niki Lauda was retired from Formula One after the 1984 season and found himself being one of the biggest entrepreneurs and businessmen in Europe at this time. He was known for his three-time world championships and, of course, his devastating crash and comeback at the Nürburgring in 1976. But around the world, for non-Formula One fans and aviation geeks like me, he was known for many things that he's done with LaudaAir. Of course, the success in short-term and long-term sustainability for LaudaAir in Austrian Airlines. In 2005, they became a subsidiary of Austrian Airlines, and the Austrian Airlines group becoming a partnership called Austrian My Holidays, which operated as a small out-of-season charter company between them and Austrian Airlines, and even worked with Lufthansa towards the end of Lauda company being its own financial aviation company. In 2007, they had an Italian subsidiary called LaudaAIR Spa, SPA, nothing to do with Spa-Francorchamps, which is a little bit disappointing. And they operated with Alitalia out of Milan Malpensa Airport in Milan, and in July 2012 they bought Austrian Airlines to create Austrian My Holiday, which is the domestic and European link with Austrian and Lufthansa Group. It is now a charter holiday company used for one-off flights and previous destinations ran by Niki, and the previous destinations are of many. Now the list of destinations was very wide. They would fly from North and South America between the USA, Canada and Mexico, as many locations in South America, including Brazil and Argentina, in Africa and Central Europe, in Asia, and of course down to Australia. They were one of the biggest airlines operating out of Austria until they were bought and worked alongside Austrian Airlines as a group, and of course now Lufthansa. When Air Berlin folded, Niki Lauda thought that LaudaAir could actually purchase Air Berlin and work alongside Lufthansa, as Air Berlin, their subsidiary, actually folded a few years earlier. At the turn of the 2010s, they operated Boeing 777-200 ER and LR aircraft. And Austrian Airlines joined Star Alliance, which is a global partnership alongside other airlines such as Lufthansa, Air India, Air New Zealand, Air Canada, Swiss and Singapore Airlines. Now Star Alliance is one of the biggest things for an airline to join, and when Air Lauda was able to sign with Star Alliance alongside Austrian and Lufthansa, it was a big thing for the airline's future. Now they sit at a fleet size of 66 aircraft flying to 38 destinations. Some of those destinations are still standing from the early days when Niki Lauda did sign them originally when the airline was founded back in 1979. Some have of course been regenerated and terminated over the years. They're also operated by Austrian and Lufthansa, which is used alongside LaudaAir, so you can still fly LaudaAir with Austrian and Lufthansa for the long haul destination. Jean Albrecht is a CEO of LaudaAir at the moment, and they work alongside the Austrian and Lufthansa group, still operating and still can be found, delivery can be found around Europe and around the world to this day. Now Laudamotion was created in the interim of that as a subsidiary, a smaller low-cost link airline, which is now being purchased by RyanAir. Laudamotion was purchased in 2018 in March, with RyanAir owning a 24.9% fee, with Alitalia and Lufthansa also owning part of Laudamotion at this point. RyanAir still hold the majority, even though you might think 25% is not the majority. They still hold the majority share of that, purchasing it for €5 million within a €5 million startup fee, and RyanAir now hold the keys to Laudamotion going forward. Niki Lauda was also a pilot for LaudaAir. He flew the Boeing 767s, the two Fokker aircraft, and the Learjet and the BAC 111 flight. The first flight of LaudaAir were actually flown by Niki Lauda, and he was a frequent flyer in aviation and also even Formula One. He flew to many of the races on his own, and he even flew some of the McLaren chief flyers, McLaren's chief technicians aboard, obviously, onto different races around the world. And it's rumoured, I don't know for sure, but it's rumoured that he even flew Alain Prost. Now, the LaudaAir company was worth a lot of money. It was rumoured to be worth around $65 million in 2012, just before it ceased operations in 2013, which is a lot of money, and a very successful company that is ran in Europe. It is known as the second most successful airline to be ran out of Austria, alongside its national airline, Austrian Airlines, which of course, as I say, purchased LaudaAir and also operated as a smaller link out of Austria. But it is still very successful, and Lauda was a very successful entrepreneur, and with a network being over $200 million, of course, following his unfortunate death just before the Monaco Grand Prix in May of 2019. He was worth $200 million by Forbes magazine, equated because of his businesses that he ran, with of course the most successful business being LaudaAir. LaudaAir was a very successful airline that operated, as I say, from 1979. LaudaAir 004 was unfortunately a plane that did crash in May of 1981 when it was flying on its return leg back from Bangkok in Thailand to Vienna in Austria. It sadly crashed, killing 223 people on board. Niki Lauda attended all of the funerals of the fallen in that crash, and he had to go to Seattle in the USA with the Boeing Corporation and have a tribunal where it was found that Niki Lauda was not guilty and it was just an error on board the flight which caused the crash. After Niki's death in May of 2019, it was attended by many people, over 5,000 people in attendance in Vienna. Of course, the motorsport industry, including Lewis Hamilton, Valtteri Bottas and Toto Wolff in his current venture at Mercedes, of course, were in attendance alongside some of the Air Lauda officials, including Jean and Christine, who are the CEO and CCO of LaudaAIR. LaudaAIR is still known all around Austria as one of the most successful airlines and one of the most successful businesses. And even though his father didn't want him going into the motorsport industry and wanted him to stay in Vienna to, of course, work in the world of banking, economics and finance, just like him, Niki didn't. He wanted to go into motorsport, but he did own a successful business. So in this way, the Lauda name continues for the third generation. In Formula 1, he was the non-executive chairman of Mercedes-AMG Petronas. He was important to getting Lewis Hamilton on board, and of course, the progression of Mercedes going from a one-time world champion in 2014 to, of course, its growth up until his death in 2019. Now they sit on 7 world championships and on the verge of possibly even getting 8 next year. We've also seen Lewis Hamilton, as I just said there, the man, he was important into getting into the team, just win his 7th world championship. He did so much for Formula 1, he did so much in Formula 1, and as I said, the Hollywood movie really portrays the work and the effort and the comeback, one of the greatest comebacks of all time for the Austrian driver. But outside of Formula 1, he is known for LaudaAIR, one of the most successful drivers, and for him to be talked about in my course is a very big thing. He is one of the biggest icons for myself, and I know a lot of you guys will like him. I'm a big fan of his motorsport career, of course, but from his aviation standpoint, it's absolutely incredible what he has been able to do. Niki Lauda ran one of the most successful companies in the world, let alone aviation and motorsport, and he will be remembered as a true hero in both sides, in 2 very different sectors in the world right now. Niki was one of the best people to live in motorsport, and he'll be remembered and one of my favourite sporting icons. So there we go, guys. We hope you've enjoyed this episode on LaudaAIR. I just want to give a big shout out to Moto Meerkat, possibly the second biggest meerkat in the world right now after Alexander on the Compare the Meerkat adverts. He did this video back in May, so please go and check his out if you haven't already. A great airline and a great insight into LaudaAIR. It is a privilege to actually research him, and I'm actually doing some research on LaudaAIR at the moment for my studies, but talk about this is a real honour. Just to see his face and just to talk about him in my course right now is an absolute honour. Anything that can link Formula 1 to my life outside of Formula 1 is absolutely incredible, and this is just another output for that. Who have enjoyed this video and learned something new about LaudaAIR, or maybe you haven't, and maybe this was just a normal video. Maybe you didn't even know Niki Lauda had an airline, because again, it is something that wasn't really hashed in the world of motorsport and Formula 1 when he was around. His incredible work with Mercedes could have possibly leapfrogged that, but he'll still be remembered for an incredible aviation industry that he created in terms of LaudaAIR as a business. He helped out Lufthansa and Austria and everyone else that was able to get parts of what he created. Even RyanAir, they might not even be the same without Niki Lauda, so maybe he helped RyanAir. That's amazing. We hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you are new to this channel, please like and subscribe. We are trying to get to 3,000 subscribers before the end of the 2020 Formula 1 season. After this weekend, we have 3 races left, back to back to back, a triple header. It's 3 weeks left, and of course with an end on the 13th of December. A late season, a very quirky season. We'll be talking a lot more about that as the weeks go on. We're about 120 away from 3,000, so please help us out. We're also on SoundCloud with our brand new podcast series, so please go and check out that if you have not already. New episode will be coming out on Saturday. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you've enjoyed this video. Please stay around on YouTube and SoundCloud for all of our new content. And until next time, guys, we'll see you later.